So welcome to this second of the webinar series. So this is a webinar on quantum security, safeguarding the digital world. So APS, in partnership with the Johns Hopkins Science Diplomacy Hub, welcomes you to an innovative international event dedicated to advancing global collaboration and understanding in quantum science and technology. This is one of several worldwide initiatives to celebrate the 2025 as the International Year of Quantum Science and Technology. Our experience helps connect science communities, industry leaders, policymakers, national labs, and the public, fostering discussions on the transformative impact of quantum technologies. All previous webinars from this series can be found on the APS YouTube channel. So today, we'll go ahead and get started with our discussion about quantum security. This is the second Quantum Connect webinar in the series. And today we have three panelists. They are Jiahui Liu, Chloe Martindale, and Bruno Huttner. So to start off, I think we're going to give you each a little bit of time to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do in the quantum industry, especially as it relates to quantum security. And then also just for the rest of this seminar, if you want to just jump in, I don't want to call on anybody, feel free to, as we go through questions, if you would like to answer, just go ahead. And then if you don't want to answer, that's also fine. Feel free to just let it go. So yeah, let's go ahead and start with introductions. So whoever would like to go first, please feel free.
Okay, I can go first. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Jiahui. I'm currently a senior researcher at Fujitsu Research of America in the robust quantum computing group. I obtained my PhD from the University of Texas at Austin, working with Scott Aaronson. And previously, before joining Fujitsu, I did a year of postdoc at MIT. So my research focus is mostly on quantum cryptography, mainly using quantum information to build cryptography unachievable by classical computers alone. And I also do quantum algorithms, quantum resistant cryptography in general. That's about me.
Great. Thank you for sharing.
Perhaps I'll go next because I kind of do the other side of the coin and that goes together nicely. So I'm Chloe Martindale. I'm a senior lecturer in cryptography at the University of Bristol in the UK. So I'm an academic and my group does research on post-quantum cryptography, which is cryptography which can be implemented on classical computers, unlike what Jiahui is doing, but is designed to hopefully be resistant to advances in quantum technology, unlike the classical cryptography that we currently use.
Okay, then I think it's for me. I'm Bruno Huttner. I'm Director of Strategic Initiative at ID Quantic. And ID Quantic is a leader in quantum cryptography. We've been developing that for more than 20 years. I joined the company about 10 years ago. And we have systems which are actually usable today in the industry to protect our digital world. So I think that's a little bit unique to have started using quantum technologies for cybersecurity, but I think we'll probably discuss that a lot during the next hour.
Wonderful. Yeah. So we have a very diverse set of experiences and perspectives. So I think this will be a really interesting conversation, and hopefully everyone in the audience will learn a lot. So starting out, the first question that we have for you is, do you have a kind of moment that first sparked your interest in quantum technologies or quantum sciences that really set you on your current career path and the kind of current research and technology interests that you have now?
Maybe I can start because my interest in quantum is probably much older than all yours. I did a PhD in quantum optics at a time where nobody knew, except a few crazy physicists knew what was entanglement and so on. So there was no quantum technology for information. And in the next 30 years or so, I saw the evolution, and that was going from something which was totally theoretical for physicists who wanted to understand the fundamentals of quantum mechanics, Einstein versus Bohr, a few crazy people. And now we are talking about companies, billion-dollar companies working in quantum computers, and so on. So I think we've seen a very, very significant change. And it's also going from purely academic to industry. And I'm actually even working for industry in the quantum domain.
Yeah, so it sounds like the kind of that development in that technology was really inspiring, which I think is definitely a shared experience for a lot of people in this field for sure. Anyone else want to add to that?
I guess I came to it quite late. So I was doing sort of esoteric research in number theory during my PhD. And when I started my postdoc in Eindhoven in the Netherlands, there was a conference which they run every year called Security in Times of Surveillance, which was a real eye-opener for me, which was really just about privacy and online privacy and the need for cryptography and all the things that are happening that I was blissfully unaware of before that point. And the people running it there, which included Tanja Lange, who was my mentor, were big advocates of post-quantum cryptography and we're very aware of all of the advances that Bruno's talking about in quantum computing that are happening in the world, maybe more aware than most governments were willing to admit at the time. And so being in that environment sort of made me end up wanting to, I wouldn't say I really work in quantum technologies, but I more work in trying to mitigate the effect on cryptography of quantum technologies, and that conference and being in that group is what led me to that area.
Actually, that's really interesting what Chloe said, because she has, coming from a totally different background, from the math side, she also have seen going from something purely theoretical with, no interest except academic to something which is so practical today that everybody has to move to post-quantum crypto. So I think in both cases, we see how something which was thought of totally esoteric, as you said, is now both in math and in physics, moving to something which is becoming really mainstream. I mean, quantum is everywhere, and post-quantum is everywhere, and so on and so forth.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think my experience is similar to Chloe's. When I was an undergrad, I just got interested in computer science in general, and then I got particularly interested in theoretical computer science, like what theoretically classical computers can do. Like that was what I first got attracted to, like how you just use mathematics to understand computing. And then I got to know somehow, okay, there is cryptography, there is these amazing encryptions based on number theory that I only know like the surface of it. And somehow coincidentally, I got to know that it's believed to be hard to break these number theoretical algebraic problems on classical computers, but somehow there's something called quantum that can break everything. And I just, at that time I was really amazed, and I decided to learn more about them. But I think I really started learning about quantum in depth after I started my PhD. Before that, I was mostly just studying everything from a classical and theoretical computer science point of view.
Maybe before we start to frighten everybody out, we should still remind people who are listening that a quantum computer does not break everything in cryptography. I mean, luckily so,
Right.
I think. But it does break a very specific part of cryptography, which is asymmetric crypto. The quantum computer can attack symmetric crypto, but we can deal with that. So let's say we still have stuff which we hope is solid, and we need to make sure that what is attacked by the quantum computer is replaced by whatever is available today, be it post-quantum as a mathematical technique or quantum. Actually, I call it, interesting enough, quantum versus quantum, because we will use quantum to fight quantum. That's also something interesting.
Yes, right. So first of all, quantum doesn't break everything we have right now. There are things that are still secure, and maybe like for some of the things, quantum may be a little bit faster than classical computers in solving stuff, but still they would be inefficient. And even for those that are breakable, there are candidates that we can replace them with post-quantum implementations. And also quantum also has the power to, if we let our honest parties, honest party to use quantum information on their own ends, they can also help them resist quantum adversaries and achieve something even stronger than what we have on classical computers. So there are like several, perspectives in these.
Yes, these are excellent points to be making very clear at the beginning. This is great. So to kind of segue into our next question, how has the landscape of quantum technology in security specifically evolved since you started in this field and with your career? And are there any developments along that, pathway that have really surprised you a lot?
I can join in if you want. Yeah, I mean, it's the evolution has been very, very strong. When I joined ID Quantic 10 years ago, we had to explain the quantum threat to everybody, because the beginning of the conversation was, there will be a quantum computer. We don't really know when. It will be a danger. We need to do that. And we could spend half of the discussion trying to convince people that this is the case. And thanks to the very large amount of work and money spent on the quantum computer, this is now totally finished. Everybody, I mean, not everybody, but let's say most people understand there is a quantum threat. And now the question is, what is the threat and how can we solve it? So at least we don't have to convince people that there is a problem. This being said, some people who are not in the field still don't really know about the quantum threat, and I think this is also something we have to be aware of. In our field here, we all know about it. We all think everybody knows, and that's not still completely the case. But most people have heard and know that they have to do something, especially Chloe might be able to say more about that, but people in cybersecurity. They are not now discussing, is there a threat? They know there is, and they need to find a solution. I think that's maybe the most important change we've seen.
Yeah, I unfortunately do still, it's probably still 50-50 for me, the people I interact with, of people being aware that this is something that the community is actively working towards and is going to happen in the near future. But it still happens to me half of the time that some will say, oh, but quantum computers aren't real, are they? That this is still something that I come up against very often. And it somehow surprises me every time because I spend so much time sort of looking at standardization processes and thinking about the nitty-gritty details of how to solve these problems. But then, of course, most people don't spend their time doing that, so that's fair enough. Yes, I guess in answer to while I'm speaking, my answer to the question would be, so obviously I've been in the field for much less time than Bruno, but it's still made there's still been quite a lot of progress since I've been working in the field, and I think the biggest step forward that was definitely surprising to me was in quantum error correction, which is about a year ago, which is a really exciting bit of progress in terms of, very specifically for quantum cryptanalysis, which is what we're talking about today, partly, right? Having qubits which are capable of error correction just makes something like Shor's algorithm much more viable on machines that look similar to the ones we have today. So that's quite exciting and terrifying at the same time, I guess. That was definitely a big jump for me.
Just as a follow-up to some of the comments you just had there, when you do have somebody who, either maybe it thinks that, quantum computers will never come, to fruition, or are just too far down the line to be a current threat that, people need to be thinking about, or are just unaware. What are kind of the, is one of those scenarios more common? Is it more common that they just don't think it's going to be too much of an issue, or kind of what leads to some of those conversations? And then, what do those conversations look like? Is it kind of how do you talk them through like what it is that you're working on and why it's important?
So for me, it kind of depends on where that person is coming from with their viewpoint. So if they are if they're a sort of technical person, but obviously not in this field, otherwise they would know, then so there's a fantastic cryptographer, quantum information theorist called Sam Jacques, and he has this beautiful diagram where he shows he's got all these points which are showing the progress of quantum computers. And on the diagram, it's got various things, including surface code error correction and some of these more subtle things that come into play. And it shows exactly when RSA gets broken, although that has been changed since 2 weeks ago. So I don't know if the diagram's up to date, but I'm sure it will be soon. And so I often use that as an aid because he's done a much better job than I ever could, I guess. If I'm talking to somebody from a less technical perspective, especially if it's somebody who is maybe interested in governance or like the more social science side of things, then I often point to like NIST's motivation for their post-quantum standardization process, because I think that's phrased quite well. If they're UK based, I showed them the UK one, but if they're not UK based, this is an international thing, right? Which basically it says something along the lines of, we don't know exactly how far off it is, but the hazard of the machines that are being built is so high, and the standardization process takes so long that this is something we need to do now. And for my personal research, the fact that these post-quantum standards are going to be the de facto standard in 2030 and classical cryptography is going to be deprecated means that we need to test its security, regardless of the progress of quantum computers, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely.
Quantum computer is a very, very technical field, and asking people to say something based on some real data about if there is a threat or not is quite difficult. There are only a few people who can really know about it, and I'm not one of them actually. Maybe Jiahui is one of them. But if you are not working on the quantum computer, you read a bit, you try and understand. So if you got people who say, oh, I know the quantum computer will never come, and they're without technical background, there is no information is what they say somehow, You cannot decide something if you don't have the right technical background. So that's also something we need to take into account to make sure that when we talk to people, either they know or they just guess or they heard, and then that's a very different type of answer, as Chloe said.
Yes, definitely. Unless Jiahui has anything to add, then we can move on to the next question.
I don't have anything. Yeah. To add.
Perfectly reasonable. So what challenges or obstacles did you face when you kind of started to transition into thinking more about quantum technologies and quantum-based security concepts? So was there something that was particularly challenging for you in working into that field? And does that provide any like advice that you might give to people who might be looking to make a similar shift themselves?
I would say I think starting with quantum is definitely the most challenging part. I think it depends on I think, of course, it also varies from specific area to specific areas. Doing experiment is very different from theoretical work, and yeah. So crypto also physics, cryptography or physics, they are also have different sort of mindset. But I do think in general there would be challenges like just understanding the intuition, like the mathematical intuition of quantum when you first start, because it is very different from classical. Once you get into there, you would see a lot of things that don't work out or magically work out when you work with quantum. So it does take like a while to adapt. Think just in terms of the mathematical and technical intuition. But once you are familiarized with the intuition and ideas there, then things would just be fine. That is my own personal experience. That is mostly in terms of research wise. I think if it's working in, for example, if you are not working like cryptanalysis for like the very pure mathematical aspect perspective, if you're just working in implementation of like existing standardized schemes, that doesn't require much understanding of quantum information. It's more just understanding of the schemes, and also these very concrete technical and engineering techniques of implementing those schemes. But if you are working in more like the foundational aspects, then it definitely requires a lot of quantum knowledge. And if you are from a classical background, it does take time to adapt. But yeah, but I think that is doable. Yeah, that's from my side.
To add something, I think that's very interesting. The intuition part, I think, is really interesting. Quantum world is very, very different from our classical world. So if you are not into quantum, you don't understand, you don't have any intuition of how it works. And that's exactly what Jiahui just have said, that you cannot build your intuition in terms of the real world, but you can build an intuition in terms of mathematics on how you can calculate using quantum. And actually, a very famous sentence, I don't remember, I think it's Bohr, is shut up and calculate, basically, or compute, we could say today, which means that you don't really have to understand quantum to be able to calculate things. But I think it's really helps also to try and build your intuition. Nicolas Gisin, who is also a famous professor in quantum, said some time ago that he believes in 10 to 20 years, so young people will have the intuition of how quantum works. I didn't have when I started. Maybe the young ladies next to me have a better intuition already, but I'm sure that the next generation, for them, entanglement, the fact that one particle goes through two holes in the same time and so on, the coherent superposition, all these things which to me or to us may be very strange, will probably look much more natural. And they will be able to do more because they can build a better intuition about how is quantum.
Add one thing about moving from, as Bruno pointed out, moving from something from a very theoretical background into something more practical, which for me was a big change that wasn't necessarily towards quantum, but towards cryptography. But I guess this would be applying if someone was moving from theoretical physics, or would be a similar journey. So especially talking to young researchers now, who happens to me relatively often that someone comes to ask me about that. There were two main sort of culture shocks that I think were maybe useful to know. One is that interesting research happens in industry, which I guess most of the people at this webinar know. But at least in the sort of theory, like number theory world, you're sort of trained to believe that if you go and work in industry, then you won't get to do any research ever again. And in cryptography and in quantum, in fields where research is part of the industry, that's just not true. You can go into industry, you can go back to academia, you can half and half, you know, everything is sort of open to you. And figure out what works for you. And the other thing is about what other people find interesting. I mean, what you find interesting is the most important, I guess. But going from number theory to cryptography, and number theory, the most general thing is sometimes the most interesting, which is actually often the least interesting thing to a cryptographer, because they want to solve a very specific real-world problem, which is quite likely to fall in the edge case that doesn't go in the full general pot that the number theorist is looking at. And not just it might not be relevant, but it needs to be understood by as many people as possible, rather than be as hard as possible. And these are almost opposite things. So I think those two were the biggest culture shocks for me, moving into quantum adjacent field, I guess.
I think the link between academia and industry is very interesting. And actually, in my field, in quantum security, I would say maybe 80% of the big professors have also started in the same field. So I mean, the moving from one to the other is now, I would say, seamless, or even maybe too much, going towards trying to get something practical out of that. Of course, we've been doing that at ID Quantic for 20 years, trying to transform something theoretical into a real-world application. But it's very, very true that there is little difference now between research in academia and research in the industry. You can really do both.
Do you see that also translates to lots of collaboration opportunities amongst all of these different sectors, or is it more, focused on an individual's experience, being able to kind of themselves move between each sector?
I would say collaboration is between people, no matter where those people are. So I work with people who are at other universities as well as people in industry, and often it's the same person who then finishes their PhD and then starts a job at IBM or, wherever. IBM is one of my main collaborators, as you can see from my bottle. But yeah, I would say collaborations between people, for me anyway.
You're right, Chloe. I think it's very important to have collaboration. Unfortunately, it's getting a little bit more difficult because we work in a field where security and nations have a say on their security, and it's getting a little bit more complex now to be able to collaborate worldwide. I mean, many years ago, we could go to China, we would work there, there would be no problem. It was far enough for real application to have no problem at all. Now, China is just an example, obviously. I don't want to pick on anybody specific, but let's say clearly it's getting a little bit more complex if you want to bring in collaboration totally international because of this security aspect. I mean, if you're working in cybersecurity, you work more at the national level, or maybe international, but within an alliance or something like that. And that's, I think, is a little bit natural moving from totally academic to the industry world. And in security, probably even worse than in other fields.
So, kind of stepping back into kind of the more technical side of the topic, are there quantum application areas that you believe might deliver the first example of a commercially significant breakthrough? And if you have any ideas on what that might be, could you kind of explain, why that's kind of standing out to you in particular?
Well, quantum cryptography has already delivered a real practical aspect. I mean, we are using single qubits, so that's what is That's what makes it easier. You create a qubit, you measure it, and already you got something you can do with them. And this can be a very practical thing. Now, is quantum cryptography going to replace all the other types of cryptography? Of course not, but it's an added tool which you can use today. So I think the movement from ideas to real world has already happened in quantum, at least in this field. Another thing which is also very relevant is about randomness, actually. It's even easier. Quantum mechanics is random. I mean, you have random results. So it's very easy to create randomness with quantum mechanics. And it's actually much harder if you use only classical systems. And here again, we got some very, very practical results. One of them being a quantum random number generator, for example, in mobile phones. And I can tell you, we sold millions of these, which means that you cannot say it's a little niche market anymore. It's really getting there. As soon as you deal with many qubits, it's going to be much more complex. And that's not exactly my field, so I may leave somebody else to answer to that.
Yeah, I agree with Bruno. I think quantum random number generator is actually one of the most promising applications of using the power of quantum information and computing itself to actually help with cryptography. And in particular, it's something that would appear in the near term instead of something in the far future. And there's also something else that requires, I think, I'm not a hardware person, so I can't really say too much about the exact progress on the hardware side, but these protocols have already been built as well, at least in labs, and successfully implemented. It's something called quantum key distribution protocol, where also your goal is actually trying to do something that's already done by classical cryptography, that is a key exchange process where you allow two honest parties, Alice and Bob, to generate a shared key, while some evil third party, Eve, is like watching their communication channel. But right now it's a quantum communication channel. And using quantum information, you can do something that gives more security guarantee than what has been achieved classically. Actually, what has been achieved classically, like the often used protocol, if you rely on these quantum insecure mathematical assumptions, then those protocol will be insecure once the adversaries, the evil parties, become fully quantum. But right now, if you use this, if you ask the honest Alice and Bob to run their protocol with quantum computers, and it doesn't have to be, it doesn't even have to be a fully powerful quantum computer. It's just quantum devices that can do certain tasks that allow them to finish these key exchange process using quantum communication. Then what good? What completely resistant to any classical or quantum attacks, and you don't need to rely on any conjecture. So it's not like a certain classical protocols where we say, okay, if a certain math problem is hard, then this protocol is secure. It doesn't even have to rely on that. It simply relies on the powers and unique properties of quantum mechanics. So this is also something that can appear and be widely applied in the near future, because it doesn't even require these fully powerful quantum computers, but quantum communication channels, or you can use classical communication channels, but entanglement between the honest parties. But the devices on their ends can that do not have to be like fully powerful quantum computer that does everything, but only the certain simple tasks. So of course there are still, I believe there's still a lot hardware barriers we have to overcome in order to make this makes this something scalable that everyone can use, but it's already developing very fast.
If I may, I want to disagree very slightly with you, just because you said in the near future quantum will be used for that. Well, quantum is used for that now. I mean, without the quantum cryptography, without quantum key distribution, I would be out of job, because ID Quantic has been trying to sell this system for about 20 years now, a bit less maybe, and we are selling this. So it means that some aspects, not all of them. Of course, you can improve quantum cryptography by adding entanglement and so on and so forth, and maybe working with several qubits. There will be many things to do, adding quantum memories. We can even discuss that. But what I would like, the message I would like to bring is really today, you can use quantum cryptography in the real world. You can install it, you can use it, it's totally secure. The key exchange is totally secure. And then you use other cryptographic tools to make the whole system work. And of course, key exchange is only a little part, a building block of the full security. This you can do with quantum. Today, you need to add a lot of mathematical stuff in order to process it. And as Jiahui said, maybe in the future, you will use more quantum. You will use many qubits together and make them interact to get more and more quantum. But today, even with a little bit of quantum and some math, you really got some new results, which are practical today. So it's not in the near future, I'm afraid, but it's today.
Yes, right.
So kind of stepping from that topic, so a somewhat related question would be, there is, you know, as you're probably very well familiar with, some amount of like hype and excitement surrounding a lot of things in the quantum field, but particularly in quantum security. How do you navigate things that are very hyped versus, you know, what the maybe different reality may be in these quantum spaces, especially when communicating with stakeholders or investors or the public?
That's a really hard question because on one side, what you want is to get people interesting and get them on board and work with you. On the other hand, you have to be careful not to say things which are not correct. And it's always a really difficult balance. And unfortunately, what I've seen in the last 10 years or so is that moving from something which was not so relevant, you know, theoretical physics, theoretical mathematics, and so on, where people were really honest and say on trying to find the pros and cons. Sometimes now you go to the match hype, and you don't pay attention to the details. So you would go saying things which were not truly correct because you want people to get involved in that. And that's really, really difficult, especially talking to people who are not experts. How do you tell enough that they follow you? But how do you avoid fooling them by telling them too much, which is not what will happen? So it's a really good question, you know, but I don't have a good answer.
Yeah, I completely agree with Bruno. I feel like any non-expert that I talk to is either massively on the hype train, and thinks that, you know, scalable quantum computers are going to be around next year, or they already exist, or, you know, my brother said to me, "But I've got a quantum computer." I was like, I don't think you do. um,
How old is your
or
brother?
he's a grown up.
So you didn't train him well, I think.
No, he's older than me. He's older than me. Or yeah, or the other side, as I, you know, mentioned before, people saying, "Oh, is quantum even real?" And the reality, of course, is somewhere in between, as we've been talking about here, that some of these smaller scale devices are a reality now, and Bruno's building them, and that's very exciting. But and the scalable devices are slowly ramping up, and we've now got quantum error correction, and perhaps will be a reality maybe in the next 5-10 years, or maybe not, but we need to prepare for it anyway. And I guess my management technique for that is the same as talking to, you know, explaining the field to people, which is again pointing to people who have thought very carefully about how to communicate to people like NIST or similar kind of bodies, saying, well, it is coming. We can't say exactly when, because this is science, this is research. If it wouldn't be interesting if we could predict it exactly, but we need to prepare for it anyway.
But being honest, like Chloe has just said, is sometimes putting you at a disadvantage, because then you fight against people who are not afraid to say much more than we agree to say. I hope I am still in the same place as Chloe, but we need to be maybe a little bit more pushy in order to push to push what we want. Otherwise, some other people will be bolder and maybe say wrong things. So we need to be quite careful about that.
I completely agree with you, Bruno. And I'm in a fairly luxurious position of talking from a, an academic with a permanent job who doesn't have to sell stuff. But I do have to write grant applications and the like, and I'm probably too honest in those, to be fair.
Yeah, when you write your grant, you have to say that it's the next best thing ever. Otherwise, it's hard to get a grant. So you are still in this field, you need to fight.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree with all of you, and I just want one sentence to add. I guess like there are a lot of hype things in quantum, but post-quantum cryptography and quantum cryptography are definitely I feel I actually a little bit underhyped in the overall quantum areas. I don't think people have been looking into them enough. Yeah, they're trying to use quantum to like. Have you seen these? There's like these funny articles online, like you use like quantum to make like shoes that like running shoes or like something like everything's from quantum. So you can relate everything to quantum, but a lot of people don't know what's going on in post quantum and quantum cryptography.
Yeah, I saw a book about quantum love, if you want. But I mean, let's be a little bit serious here. Many people use quantum to sell stuff, but that's not always right somehow. There is a lot of I don't know, phony people who are trying to put quantum everywhere. I agree with you.
So kind of going back to this topic about, people entering the field. So are there any skills that you consider most valuable for the next generation of quantum professionals, specifically beyond technical expertise? So, we've talked about like math and physics skills, but what beyond that kind of skill set would be, in your opinion, most valuable for people maybe looking to enter the field to develop?
Technical expertise, to be honest. I think within cryptography, there's like a real skills gap of people who know the number theory and the quantum information theory. In my little tiny corner in Bristol, every time a student comes to me on our maths and computer science degree, I'm like, please take these two courses. But I think me talking to, one or two students a year is not going to fill that gap. So there's a lot of quantum cryptanalysis that needs to happen on all these post-quantum schemes. And I think that the skills gap just comes from, the way that courses have run traditionally. There was no overlap between these two fields. And so there's not really much set up to put undergrads or master students in that kind of direction. And so, you either have people in their sort of numbered theory geometry world, or you have people in their quantum physics, theoreticals, computer science kind of world, and it's not often the same people. And that is something that there's a lot of stuff to be done there with somebody with the right kind of bits of knowledge and interest. That doesn't answer your question about non-technical skills, I realize, but I don't know how to answer that, so I answered a different question.
No, but I think you're still spot on, because it's very important for people in the field to actually manage the two sides, the mathematical aspect and the quantum aspect. So I think education, of course, is very important. It is a very, very technical field. If you are not happy to do the technical stuff, I think it's going to be very hard. Trying to do in two directions, maths and physics, I think that would be a very, very good advice. Don't focus only on one of them, but try and build those skills in the two of them. And maybe on my side, what I would add is remain curious. Don't only calculate stuff, but ask questions. But that's a very general statement. I mean, if you want to do research, if you want to progress somewhere in science, you need to question what you are told. You should not only act, you should learn the skill, you should learn the technical aspect, and you should keep your asking questions. That's very important. But I really like what Chloe said about we lack people who have understanding in the two fields. And that's why we're fighting all the time, because we don't have enough people knowing both aspects and who are happy to collaborate, to bridge the gap, if you want, between the two communities.
Yeah, the interdisciplinary nature is definitely something that I hear quoted a lot as a very common challenge, not just in the cryptography space, but throughout quantum technologies for sure. Building from that same kind of interdisciplinary topic, are there ways that you kind of see that quantum security and quantum cryptography and post-quantum cryptography might intersect with some of these other kind of very separate fields? So things like AI or synthetic biology or like advanced materials science. Are there ways in which those areas might intersect with quantum securities?
There is one very specific thing I could talk about, which I think is quite an interesting one. So one of the many ways that's been one of the many subfields of post-quantum cryptography that's been developed in order to meet the quantum threat is called lattice-based cryptography. It doesn't matter what that is, but just so I can use the words. And it just so happens that using lattices for cryptography allows us to do some privacy preserving techniques that we weren't able to do with classical cryptography. And maybe around the same time quantum computers could become a reality, something called fully homomorphic encryption will also become a reality. So it's sort of a future technology that people are developing. And there is, because of the way that these things work, then there's hope that we'll be able to do privacy preserving machine learning. So these machine learning algorithms, hopefully, maybe one day, using this technique that's been developed for a completely different reason, we might be able to train algorithms with machine learning without them having access to the plain text data set. So that, for example, if you want to train on a bunch of health data or something sensitive in order to learn something about cancer treatments and how effective they are, you could encrypt all that data, feed it into the algorithm, encrypt it so that you don't reveal anything to the algorithm, and still learn what you want to learn about it. So that's one way that they could intersect, but it's sort of a very niche one little thing, but it is quite an interesting application.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And certainly, yeah, that sounds like a very natural fit. Yeah, very cool. Any other kind of predictions? We're not going to hold you to any of these.
There is a lot of hype about quantum and AI, of course. I don't really understand what this is about. Of course, quantum can help AI, and AI can help quantum because you can use quantum to improve the computation, and you can use AI maybe to get the data more easily out of whatever you do in quantum. So there will be some interactions, but it's without going too much hype. I think it's very hard to know what's going on there.
Yeah, I agree. I do think there's currently, I think quantum AI, like one does help the other, but we shouldn't go into too much hype saying like, one is going to, boost the progress of the other indefinitely. I think in terms of AI for quantum, currently there is research on, how to, you have like agents that, AI agents that help you design and run these quantum experiments. It's like but it's just like automatic to automate the code writing, experiment setup, everything that saves a lot of human work. So I think this is like indeed something like kind of a generic application you could imagine from the current development of AI, but it does like to work in this field, it does require, you know, knowledge of both AI and quantum. Mm.
Maybe to add a little bit on what Chloe said, homomorphic encryption is on the classical side. It means that you have some classical information, you can encrypt it and calculate on it classically without giving anything away. But there is also the quantum aspect here, while you can have some kind of confidential calculation, confidential quantum calculation. So you have a quantum state, you ask not somebody else to compute with the quantum state, give you the result, but the person who has done the computation does not know anything about what he did. So I think you can have this classical and quantum aspect on this similarly to homomorphic encryption. That could be also very interesting.
Yes, I think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I think a quantum fully homomorphic encryption is definitely interesting. So in particular, it actually relies on classical, but post-quantum fully homomorphic encryption as well. And also it does help us solve a lot of problems that might appear in the near term world. Because imagine a world where not everyone has quantum computers, but certain corporations already have them. And those corporations can sell their services to like people who don't have quantum computing resources. Says, okay, I can do certain tasks for you. But the thing is, probably these customers, they don't want their data to be seen by those corporations when, you know, I cannot just send everything, all my personal information to you and process on your servers. But the thing is with quantum homomorphic encryption, you can actually do that. The customers can send their encrypted data and let those corporations operate on those data, send back the encrypted results, but the customers decrypt on their ends so that they can get everything down. And also their communication, everything can actually be classical. Well, it depends on the exact setting, but let's assume the customers just don't have quantum, but they need quantum. They don't have quantum computing power or communication channels, but they do need some quantum computation done on their classical data. And in that case, quantum fully homomorphic encryption can help a lot. It's a very good example of something that can happen.
I'm not sure you need. I'm not saying you couldn't use it, but I'm not sure you need quantum fully homomorphic encryption for this. Because if you just use fully homomorphic encryption with lattice, sorry, let me speak slower. If you just use fully homomorphic encryption with lattices on the user end, and you send your encrypted data over any channel, just upload it, whatever.
Right. I think the thing is, essentially on the user end, it's actually just well, this is getting a bit technical, but quantum fully I'm imagining a scenario where, you know, the user data are classical, but what they want to do on the server side, it's going to be quantum circuits. So the computation they're going to perform is quantum. So, you know, probably somewhere in the middle of the computation, there are quantum states, but let's say the input and output, the user will see are classical. And on the user side, the user only has to do, just like you said, only has to do a classical lattice-based fully homomorphic encryption. So, and also actually the quantum fully homomorphic encryption can be built upon the lattice-based classical fully homomorphic encryption. So everything everything is classical on the user side. I think the server side is slightly more complicated, but it's like but it's still essentially it's still lattice-based. Everything is still based on lattices and nothing else.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah, but what I wanted to say was about purely quantum as well. I mean, the idea is you can have confidential quantum computation, in a sense that you send a quantum state to another computer. So let's forget about homomorphic encryption. I think it's the same kind of use, but with a different way to do it. I mean, it's really, you have your quantum state and you want to do computation on that, but you don't want the other side to learn anything about what kind of state it has, what kind of information. And there are ways to do that, it seems, also with quantum. So that's what I wanted to add, simply that homomorphic encryption is working on classical stuff. And of course, you can do also something purely quantum and use the result afterwards. Of course, at the end of the day, any result has to be classical, because if you want to be able to talk about something, you need to measure. And then, of course, the end result would be always classical. So any quantum computation starts with classical and ends with classical, obviously. But in the middle, you can basically send states to other computers who can do things for you, always keeping the quantum side, and these computers will not learn about what you are trying to do. So that's why I thought it was a little bit similar to your homomorphic encryption, Chloe, but
Yeah.
keeping it quantum.
All right, we are getting close to the hour mark. So we have one more question to finish up, and then we're going to move to some questions from the audience that we've been collecting through this period. So the last question that we have from our main set here is just what is a misconception about careers in quantum technology that you might like to clarify for audience members who are considering this field? We talked a little bit earlier about, the kind of risks and threats surrounding cryptography, but do you have anything to add to that topic?
On my side, I'm not answering because I don't think there is any misconception I have. So I thought that my colleagues would have, but maybe none of us have. We all believe that a career in quantum is probably a good. I mean, okay, now I'm speaking for myself, obviously. I think would be a very nice career move because it's a new topic and we see a lot of development both in quantum security, quantum computing, quantum sensing. So I think you can pick your own and do something there. And I think it can be very interesting. So I don't see any bad ideas about this or any misconceptions, really. That's why I kept silent for a change.
I kept silent mainly because my main misconception has been very thoroughly answered already in the hour, which is more a misconception about the field in general, which is the very badly named post-quantum cryptography is maths rather than quantum quantum physics. But I think that's pretty clear from the discussion already. Maybe I don't know what career level the audience are at, but something I hear a lot from parents of prospective students and prospective students coming to university is people worrying about any career in computing being taken over by AI, which I personally wouldn't worry about at the moment, because the level of thinking that large language models or large reasoning models can perform is considerably lower than any of my first years. So, or even my the people I run workshops for in the last 2 years of high school. Of course, that may change, but I don't think there's much threat to the industry in the long term, apart from overuse of AI.
Yes,
Right?
I agree. Yeah, I think currently, yeah, that may change, but currently I don't think they can replace anyone in the industry, researchers, and but they do help sometimes with like work efficiency. Like they are really nice assistants. Sometimes like you're not going to just throw hardcore research questions at them and they wouldn't give you like valid answers in that case, but they it does help you search for problems and sometimes sort out like some of the nuances that you don't want to deal with in the work. But I don't think they can replace any researcher in the industry at the moment.
All right. Well, thank you for this conversation so far. It's been great. So we have some questions from the audience that are kind of varied in their perspectives. So some of them will come from, we have some students and postdocs, and then some other, different stages of careers, basically. So the question we'll start out with here is, given that most of the post-quantum cryptography is based on classical communication, how much quantum information does we need to know to dive into this area? So maybe Chloe might be mostly directed to you.
Yeah, it's a great question. So it kind of depends on where you want to do your research in the area. It's a quite a big field now. You can work in the field without knowing any quantum information if you want to, depending on what you want to do. Where I do my research is mostly, I'm most of the time trying to do cryptanalysis. So that is trying to break the schemes using any means possible. So that's either a classical computer or quantum information theory, which is where the quantum information theory comes in. But you don't have to do that. You can just try and break it using classical mathematics, and sometimes you succeed. And that in a way is easier because you can just try things and see what happens. But it's also fun to think about all the tools you've got at your disposal with quantum information theory. And if you want to propose new schemes, which they're kind of two sides of the same coin, and you end up doing it whether you want to or not, I guess. You definitely need to be in a position to at least think about the like the quantum hardness of these problems.
Yeah, I think you especially because it's the post-quantum cryptography is designed to withstand the quantum threat. I mean, of course, nobody can know everything, but you still have to understand how you can attack them on the quantum way, and that's what you are doing, obviously. Most of the schemes which have been broken so far have been broken. I mean, the schemes which have been broken so far have been broken with a classical computer. But the really interesting part will come when you have a real quantum computer and you start working with these on to attack the schemes, because until we really do that, we cannot be totally sure that the post-quantum will withstand the quantum threat. So that's very, very important to have at least some knowledge of quantum to see how it can be attacked. Otherwise, you do classical cryptography, really.
There are a couple of examples of, I guess, lower profile examples which have been broken with quantum information theory, but not classically. But yeah, definitely all the high profile attacks have been classical so far. I think because it's in a way easier because you can mess around, and as you say, Bruno, once we have a quantum computer, that's going to change, I think.
I'm sure the geeks will start working with quantum computers. I mean, let's say you got quantum computers in free access or easily accessible. You will have all these people who will start to work with them as they do now with their classical computer. And then we don't know what these guys can do. I mean, they're really clever normally.
Yeah, honestly, it keeps me up at night worrying about that.
So we have another related question from someone in the audience about how can we ensure the sort of assumptions that we make to develop post-quantum cryptography are reasonable. So they mention in this particular comment that they are aware of a potential recent scare about LWE being solved by a quantum adversary. If you may or may not know about that. But yeah, do you have any answers for this question?
I do. I'm aware of the other. Oh, sorry, Bruno, do you want to go first?
No, I just wanted to say there have been quantum attacks on the lattice-based systems which were not successful so far. And you can see it in two ways. Either it's because it will never be successful, or it's just the beginning. But you're the expert, so please go on.
Well, you're completely right. I mean, To be honest, you can't be sure. You can never be sure, but you can't be sure about RSA or elliptic curve cryptography either, which is what we currently base it on. And as Jiahui was saying earlier, one of the really nice things about quantum key distribution is there you really can be sure, because there you have perfect security, which is something we don't have with classical cryptography. But on the other hand, you can say, well, we've built our modern internet on believing that everybody's tried hard enough to solve classical cryptography. So that's factoring and the discrete logarithm problem. And with post-quantum cryptography, all we can try and do is the same. So it's definitely had less attention than factoring or the discrete logarithm problem for two reasons. One is that it's newer, and the other is that it's a lot more complicated. So far fewer people are able to think about the problems. But I guess the community is doing the best we can do. So in terms of what is done for learning with errors, so which is the example that you mentioned in your question. So learning with errors is the most generic version of the hard problem that's underlying the leading standards at the moment. And there's been a lot of work relating that to problems that have been well studied by mathematicians for a long time, like the shortest vector problem, and many other problems as well. There's been work solving similar looking problems to show that people have been trying. But there could be a new attack at any moment. I'm not going to say there won't be. I'm trying also. I mean, this is the people in the I wouldn't be trying if I thought it was impossible. The quantum attack from last year, I have actually spoken to the author about it. He still is trying to fix it. It's a very interesting paper. It looks very hard to fix, but maybe somebody else will come up with something else. And as Bruno says, once we have scalable quantum computers, playing around with them becomes a much more viable option. So who knows?
So our next question is, how crucial is an understanding of the system's Hamiltonian in modeling things like decoherence and noise and other physical layer behaviors that impact security, especially when related to QKD or satellite-based development?
Okay, so actually in quantum cryptography, you don't need to worry about the coherence and so on. You can work with a single photon. You can also work with entangled photons, but that's not the thing we do today. So you create a photon, you send it, and then you measure it, and there is no issue about decoherence, decoherence is really coming when you have a large number of entangled photons which lose the coherence between them. So I would say for standard quantum cryptography, this issue does not come really. Same satellite or fiber is exactly the same. I mean, in theory, it's the same. In practice, of course, doing it with free space and moving satellites might be a little bit harder, but there is no real difference between them. Theoretically, at least at the moment. Of course, in the future, there will be new schemes. I think we discussed that a bit. And maybe these schemes will use entanglement and will use maybe many entangled particles to do quantum repeaters and to do all the way maybe at some stage to the quantum internet. And that all this idea of decoherence will become absolutely crucial. But we are still quite far from this, and we can do quantum cryptography without this worry, at least today.
All right, our next question is, from your perspectives as experts in quantum cryptography, what is your perspective on how this technology contributes to broader security and real world like issues for everyday citizens, perhaps? So Their question is that are we using our knowledge of physics to address fundamental human problems, or is this really just kind of continuing to shift the focus of security to new scales as we continue to progress?
I think security is actually a human problem. I mean, cybersecurity, security obviously, but cybersecurity, this is what we are discussing today. I mean, we now believe that it's a fundamental issue that you can be on the internet and be safe and send information which is secure, so confidential. Also, you need to know that you're talking to the right person, that somebody cannot impersonate you. So I think the issues you're trying to solve with quantum cryptography or post-quantum cryptography are really relevant to human beings. I mean, it's not a technology for the sake of technology. Today, we are all, and even now, we are all online. Nobody wants to go back to some previous world where you would send a fax to somebody to let him know about something, or make a phone call was not always so easy either. So we want to keep that, and therefore all the problems, all the issues we've been discussing today are truly relevant for everybody. Now, in quantum cryptography itself, I would say for the moment, it's still the quantum cryptography will be used by major corporations, government, and so on. Maybe not so much for the small citizen, for the citizen itself, for the user himself. For example, I will not use quantum cryptography to connect from my PC here to you because it's just too expensive. But we can forecast a time where we could have a purely quantum network, maybe quantum internet or something similar, which will help having a fully secure transactions all over the world from anybody to anybody. And then that would be the grail, but that will take a lot of time. So today it's more for big things. Sometimes we will go to being used for any user as well.
I would say this is really the fundamental difference in the goals of quantum cryptography and post-quantum cryptography. So as Bruno said, quantum cryptography at the moment is focused on big corporations and governments because of the cost. And I think partly because of that, the focus of most people doing research in post-quantum cryptography is making it as cheap and easy as possible to switch over everybody's security now to post-quantum. Whether that's forever or whether that's interim depends on whether this quantum internet of Bruno's dream becomes a reality. But I'm not saying we can definitely do it, but it's feasible. And it's the goal of, powerful people like NIST and other equivalents to try and switch over all certificates and all standards on everybody's devices, no matter what they are, by 2035 at the latest. So that is for the everyday citizen.
Yeah, I think it's a really good answer that for everyday citizen today to provide security, post-quantum will be absolutely needed. Then you can add some quantum cryptography in the big things, in maybe the main branch of the network, and maybe in the future there will be something different. But definitely, if tomorrow, today and tomorrow, we want to have secure transaction over the internet, we definitely need post-quantum and we need the standardization as we discussed, and we need really to switch to this new framework for cryptography. So we can agree on that even. That's great.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I agree as well.
All right. I think that's about all the questions that we have time for at this point. So if anybody has any last questions from the audience or the ones that we didn't get to, I believe Stephanie and Leo will be reaching out or send them an email as well, and they can connect you with the right experts. So to wrap up, is there any topic or comment that we did not get to today that you wish we had that you'd like to bring up before we close here?
Okay, since we're talking to students, I had a kind of idea challenge I would like them to think about. As we discussed today in quantum, when you deal with a single qubit, you already can do things you cannot do classically. So you can do quantum cryptography, you can do quantum random number generator, all that with single qubits at a time. Then you move to exactly very far away and you start building quantum computers, which are giving interesting results when you get thousands and hundreds of thousands of qubits together. And that also gives you something very, very interesting. And what I find lacking is what's happening with 10 or 15 qubits. Could you make them really relevant for something? So it's a challenge for all the students who are following us. We're trying to think about new ideas. What is interesting in 10, 15, 20 qubits in its own sake? I mean, not as part of the beginning towards a quantum computer, but really something useful with a relatively small number of qubits. I believe there will be things in quantum sensors we didn't discuss at all. There could be other things, and I think it's an interesting question to leave the audience with. So that would be my end.
Wonderful. Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Our next webinar installment will be on July 14th, I believe. So please keep an eye out for that. And let's thank our speakers again. And I hope you guys all have a wonderful the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Again,
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
bye. Yes.
Thank you.